All right. Well, I'm going to do a real quick overview. I know many of you have had long days, legislators, and we greatly appreciate you being here, as well as our board and our cabinet and our community members. This is our annual legislative forum, COVID style, virtual, and we're excited to host this opportunity to have some conversation. There was some great conversation already taking place before we started about bills and topics that impact our school district and our community. For tonight's forum, we'll be providing some information of our current reality during COVID, providing some input and feedback on proposed legislation, and give our elected officials an opportunity to share some information with us. There will be a question and answer function for those of you that are participating at the end of the session. So if you would, please wait for your questions at that time. It's my pleasure right now to introduce Warren's School Board President, Rachel Burke, and she will lead the next section here.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. If I could have you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to start by thanking everybody who could join us here tonight. I'm going to begin with our state senators that represent Warren Township, and we have Senator Kreider and Senator Breaux and Senator Freeman, and all three are able to be here, and we do so greatly appreciate that fact. Also, we have invited our state representatives. I know that Representative Gore is on the call and I think is getting moved over. He was having the same problems, Representative Gore was having the same problems that Senator Kreider was having, is my understanding. And that Representative Johnson's and Shackelford both have conflicts. Representative Johnson is hoping to be able to get here later tonight, but he is currently in a committee meeting, and we have all been in those that have run over. So also Councillor Lakeisha Jackson is on the call. Thank you so much for being here today. Councillor Hart may be able to attend later, and Councillor Ray also has a conflict, but we do appreciate him letting us know that. And then board member wise, I am Rachel Burke. I'm the president of the School Board for MSD of Warren Township. Also on the call, we have Gloria Williams, who is the board vice president. Terry Amos will be on the call later. She's not yet connected. Julie French and LaShawna Triplett and Howard Dorsey are all also on the call as well. And hopefully Michelle Wright will also be able to join us later. I think we're having a combination of technical problems and weather going on. So with that, I want to open by thanking everyone for being here this evening. I have been joking for about a month that this will be the most entertaining and interesting legislative breakfast that we have ever held. Because interesting times lead to interesting solutions, and that's where we are now. We are 11 months into the largest societal event that most of us have lived through. Virtually every aspect of society has changed, and nowhere are those changes more significant than in our public schools. We have reacted as educators, employers, and food and healthcare providers. Our actions and responses cover all age ranges and segments of society. We have kept children and families safe and fed while simultaneously providing employment and education. Society really has had a reawakening in regards to the importance and the necessity of public schools and the work that we do. We are considered a fundamental part of the economic engine, which I think is something that had kind of been forgotten. That is unfortunately and fortunately exactly why every action decision, whether it occurs nationally, internationally, or locally, regarding public education is so highly publicized and scrutinized. We are providing a necessary service while operating under a microscope. It is the legislature, and some of you were on it and many of you were not, that made the decision a few years ago, that the general fund would be the primary source of school funding. Since the beginning of that shift, the general fund is now a full percentage less of the state's GDP. It began at over 6% and is now roughly 5%. And the amount that urban school districts, and specifically Warren Township, receives of that has been outpaced by inflation. Once you add on vouchers and unfunded mandates, Senate Bill 54 would be an example, we are doing more and more with less money every year. Our success is important to our community, the state, and society as a whole. In order for us to be successful, please hear me when I say that the attacks on public education just have to stop. A year ago, we were promised that teacher pay would be the main consideration of the 2021 to 2023 biennium budget. We were told that the issue of complexity would be addressed. We were assured that the place that public education and public school teachers have in society would be acknowledged and respected. And while I respect that obviously many, many things have changed since that conversation, I know that the message that is heard that when safe and virtual school funding is questioned and threatened, while simultaneously teachers are not allowed to be vaccinated as first responders, a decision many other, in fact, the majority of other states have not made, that it is education and educators seem to be not a primary concern of the state. In order to help hopefully flip that today, we would like to share with you, as we do every year, the work that Warren Township is doing and ask for your support. Thank you.
Wow. That was quite an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Make sure I'm not muted here. Okay. First, I want to share a real success story, and there's more than just one story. Last year, Warren Township, along with Richmond School Corporation and MSD Washington Township, spearheaded Senate Bill 398. I know, Senator Freeman, you were a part of that legislation, so we appreciate your support. For us to work with seniors who would not graduate due to extreme credit deficiency. The program focuses on education and skill training. Students build educational skills to pass a national skill assessment, and they also earn an Indiana-issued high school equivalency, or HSE, diploma. Students then go on to earn or learn occupational skills to earn an industry-recognized career credential. In Warren Township, 14 seniors have joined this program this year. We are proud to share that 10 of those students have successfully earned their HSE equivalency diploma and have begun working towards earning an industry-recognized career certification, such as a CDL, nursing assistant, or heating and ventilation HVAC. At this time, I would like to share a testimony by one of those 10 students, Gary Hollenquest, with his journey that got him to where he is today.
Like how I grew up, I say I didn't really have much. I was always struggling through a lot of stuff. Grew up a lot poor, homeless, didn't have a lot of places to go.
Sorry.
Like how I grew up, I say I didn't really have much. I was always struggling through a lot of stuff. Grew up a lot poor, homeless, didn't have a lot of places to go. And then I ended up moving in with my grandmother. So when I moved in with my grandmother, my mom had passed away. So that's what really struck me the hardest. And I just stopped, I completely shut down for a while. And I just didn't go to school, didn't leave my house, didn't leave my room, nothing really. I was just stuck in this little, what do I want to call it, like a dark place. And then that's when my grandmother had enrolled me into Warren Township, I'd say. And I think this program is finally opening a good light path for me, because it's really making some changes for me. I'll tell you that, because if I was still in school, it's just I didn't see myself really going anywhere other than down a dark road and into either jail or dead at that point. So this program has done a lot for me.
Gary is a smart, charismatic young man, as you can tell. And he was a model student for us. He's earned his HSE. He's currently working on a welding certificate, and it just has been one of the many successes. So again, we want to thank you for your support in allowing us to do this, so that we can reach some of those students that still need to be reached. As Rachel shared with you, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and what we want to share with you this evening is the impact that COVID has had on us since March 13th, when we closed schools down. And you're going to hear more details on kind of what you see on the screen here. In all of the situations, whether it was student, family, or staff, our immediate default was basic needs, making sure that food, shelter, physical safety, psychological safety were being met. You will notice that social emotional needs are on all three groups, because this impact has been felt on all three of these groups in terms of change, dealing with trauma, dealing with individuals that they know have had COVID or passed from COVID, just turning their routine upside down. Obviously, from a student standpoint, you're going to hear about the academic needs. We have made a commitment not to call it learning loss, because that implies that our students did something wrong or that our teachers did something wrong. What we're experiencing is an opportunity to learn loss. And what we are going to be focusing on going forward is, how do we make up that time? Our students and teachers have lost time to learn. We recognize in Warren Township, as well as many other school districts, that the access to learning through technology was a barrier. And you'll hear that tonight and how we've addressed that. I know that Warren is not the only school that has experienced an engagement issue. Students are not engaging at the same level as they once did. And I can speak personally from having a teenager who's a freshman. This is a lot harder than traditional school. The communication you'll see across the board is something that we've really ramped up and tried to improve and increase. As things have been changing on a rapid basis, we needed to make sure that communication was there. Obviously, screen fatigue is something that we're dealing with. Something specific to Warren, and Rachel Burke mentioned the complexity issues, and we've had these conversations before during the legislative forum. We've kind of described that COVID did create, some new problems, but really what COVID has done is it's magnified problems that already existed. We've already had a disproportionate impact due to poverty and transiency. COVID has exacerbated those concerns. So it's really forced us, and again, you'll hear that later this evening. Our staff has done an amazing job. And if there's any time that teachers need to be elevated and supported, now is the time, because they have worked miracles. On one end, we've heard that they're essential workers, and they need to align with the same rules and expectations as frontline workers. But on the back end of this, they're not treated as essential workers in terms of vaccination. And whether that's intentional or not intentional, the message that's getting to our teachers right now is not a positive one, nor is it a supportive one. And our teachers are going through a lot. They have care fatigue. They're trying to figure out their own situations based on what COVID has caused, and maintain a high quality experience for their students. So the next few slides and the next few presenters are going to share with you kind of what our current reality is in each of their spaces. The first one that I will introduce is Brian Simpkins, our Chief Human Resource Officer.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending and joining us this evening. I just want to say a few words briefly about Warren's response to COVID from an HR standpoint. Certainly, there have been a lot of opportunities and challenges, but you've heard us say it before, and indeed it's true. We are primarily a people-oriented business, and so investing in our people and our staff is of paramount importance. And that's never been more true than the past year. And as I reflect, I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Hansen. It's really amazing how our staff have, despite the anxieties and the stress and everything we've had to contend with, all things considered, how they've performed admirably in their roles. And so we're so appreciative of that. Just, as you can imagine, and in the best of times, staffing can be a real challenge. But certainly with COVID, balancing student enrollment with appropriate staffing levels to maintain both virtual options and in-person options has been very challenging. And you'll hear more from my colleagues in a minute about some of that. With the virtual, it was kind of like constructing a school from scratch. The proverbial building the airplane while flying it, and as HR's role was always to make sure that staff. We had to kind of look at student enrollment versus numbers of staff and FTEs, because we knew we needed virtual teachers, but we didn't necessarily want to hire a whole slew of new teachers to teach virtually, in addition to in-person teachers. So you can imagine not only gauging student enrollment, but also gauging staffing levels was extremely challenging. But we pulled it off, and my colleagues have done a wonderful job. Every time we've had to pivot, even when we had to go back to briefly all virtual operations, we've always been able to manage to get people where they need to be, despite the challenges. Of course, with virtual, we've always required our virtual teachers to still report physically to work, unless there was a justified accommodation. They all still physically report to work. And then for in-person, we would always look at staffing primarily in the sense that we wanted to make sure that we fostered social distancing, and that we were making sure that the school experience in person was always safe for both staff and students. You probably have heard plenty and don't need me to tell you that it's been a challenge often to cover teacher absences. In fact, in most cases, you hear from districts where if they've had to close down or switch gears, it's often because sub-coverage was wanting, and it's very difficult to cover classrooms, not so much with positive cases. In fact, overwhelmingly, the school environment has been very safe, but we've had challenges with quarantines and isolations. And so there were times where things would get a little grim, and we always keep track of the COVID data. And so we've had to come up with creative solutions, like paying some of our instructional assistants a bonus, hourly bonus for stepping in sometimes to sub. Even for virtual teachers, we've had to come up with creative ways to make sure that lessons get covered and those types of things. So as you can imagine, sub coverage has been a challenge in Warren. This is our first year with going with Kelly Education Services for our subs, and even they have contended with COVID. And so that has been an overwhelming challenge, as I'm sure you've heard. We've had to be ever vigilant with health and safety protocols for staff, and you'll hear more about that from Mr. Holt. But we had to kind of condition our staff to get used to the idea of taking some extra steps. Everybody really had to pitch in above and beyond the usual, including classroom teachers, in terms of making sure that certain cleaning protocols were kept up, and that we were extra diligent in doing that. Of course, providing PPE and those types of things for staff. Screening procedures were essential. As we got into the school year, we had to make sure that before any staff member reports physically to work, that they make sure that they screen themselves and monitor their own health. And that certainly if you were exhibiting symptoms, report that to your supervisor. Don't come to work, or check to make sure whether and to what extent you may have been in close contact with somebody, and those types of things. So screening before coming to work has been something that we've all had to get used to and conditioned to. And of course, tracking, as I mentioned, tracking COVID data. We've had to, along with that, keep up to date on guidance and stipulations from the CDC, the State Department of Health, and the County Department of Health. And so just constantly maintaining, both for students and staff, positive cases where people have been quarantined, reporting those, and just keeping tabs on that. Of course, in HR in my shop, we work closely individually with each employee as they contend with quarantines and isolations. And then as the employer, we direct them on, hey, we gather the facts, we gather the documentation, and we just make sure that they understand the timelines involved and so on. You've heard, I'm sure, of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. The first semester of the school year, that was in force. And so that could involve anything from providing job protected leave for situations involving one's child's childcare shutting down for COVID, perhaps their child's school went all virtual. We dealt a lot with that early on, but in addition, whether you had to maybe take care of a parent or a loved one and those types of things under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So we would handle a lot of that job protected leave and keep tabs on that. As you know, that lapsed on December 31st, but Warren Township made the conscious decision to continue on with job protected leave as necessary in certain circumstances. And that's just one example where we've frankly gone to bat for working people in our district. We also continue to address specific staff accommodations and work from home flexibility on a case-by-case basis. So for instance, we've had a number of teachers over the age of 60 who, depending on their health condition, may not have felt safe. And so I can remember going back to July and actually meeting with 4 or 5 teachers a day who had legitimate health concerns or due to age were concerned about. And so one way or another, we were able to accommodate folks, and a lot of folks who had some health issues but felt comfortable teaching virtually, for instance, in an empty classroom, ended up being a viable option. So we continue to work with staff one-on-one with accommodations, and if applicable, certain ability to work from home. Finally, in regard to support staff, especially with regard to operations, oftentimes, as you can imagine, the COVID pandemic has impacted those staff with work disruptions. We have done a lot of novel and creative things to invest in our people to keep things going. So for instance, what I mentioned, the health protocols. So for our custodians, especially the day custodians at the schools, they had all of a sudden way more work than usual. So we accordingly then increased their pay. We also pulled bus drivers, and we pay them a certain rate in between their AM and PM routes. In our K4 buildings, for instance, we had 2 bus drivers on hand to help with the front office work, as well as help the day custodian with some basic cleaning. And those are just a couple of small examples of how we have tapped people and kind of gone all in on making sure things continue to operate. And of course, when we went all virtual from about mid-November to mid-January, we tapped a lot of our transportation staff to do all kinds of jobs, from helping with childcare opportunities and more cleaning and all kinds of other operations and projects that we had going on. So those are a couple of just brief ways that we have contended with the challenges and opportunities with COVID from an employee and staff perspective. Dr. Hanson?
Thank you, Brian. We'll just kind of move through this, and then if you have questions at the end, legislators, feel free to ask those.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Legislators, every year I always want to thank you for your time. This is my 21st legislative forum, and it's always one of my favorite things of the year. I think the opportunity to share our successes, share our stories is important for you to hear, but also us to maybe give you some ideas that maybe we are seeing legislatively that we can provide you some insight. But, in the response to COVID, as I look at it from an operations perspective, we really broke it down to facilities, transportation, and food service. And how could those 3 areas support the different learning environments that we were going through, whether it be in person, hybrid, virtual. From a facilities perspective, we really had to step back and rethink how we were going to ensure, first and foremost, that our facilities were safe for our students and our staff. And we had always done a very good job in our facilities area, but we really had to to take a step back and really identify those high traffic areas, high touch areas, and how are we going to, from a capacity standpoint, make sure those were clean every day. So we had to reevaluate our staffing. We had to reevaluate different roles and responsibilities to ensure that restrooms, office areas, lobby areas, nurses, playgrounds, cafeterias were cleaned, not just once during the day, but multiple times throughout the day. Making sure that every classroom had appropriate disinfectant, hand sanitizer, microfiber towels to help. As Brian talked about, we are very fortunate that our professional staff have jumped in and been part of the solution to help us make sure that whenever we have students in our buildings, that we are providing a safe environment, and our teachers have done a tremendous job to help in that process where we can't necessarily get to those areas from a custodial perspective. And then also just in the business office, really one of our biggest challenges was identifying how to get PPE. Back in the summer, it was very difficult, and we were getting online just to order disposable masks, hand sanitizer, everything that was necessary, plexiglass standards to make sure people were safe. And we are still finding challenges of 3 to 6 month delays on sometimes ordering things, but we've done a nice job of getting out in front of that. We started March 13th actually ordering supplies, and we were one of the first to actually get some things. So when we were ready to start back in August, we had everything we needed, and we've maintained that inventory in our warehouse. And as schools need disposable masks, any sort of PPE equipment, supplies, we're able to deliver that on a daily and especially a weekly basis. I want to give a shout out to our transportation folks as we've modified, changed, created new opportunities to reach kids. We've always been able to find the ability to reroute, create new midday opportunities, and always find a way to get kids to and from school, but also safely. Every bus is cleaned and sanitized after each route. And then we've taken extra steps to every 2 weeks, we have a cleaning crew come in and completely scrub and fog every bus to make sure that not only what they're doing daily and after each route, but we get to hit every square inch of the bus every 2 weeks. And that has really made it a safe environment. And I believe our transportation is not ever going to be a barrier for safety when it comes to COVID. And then lastly, it's always been an emphasis in this district to make sure our students have adequate accessibility to food. And I'm extremely proud of our food service area for never skipping a beat. From March 13th to today, we have not taken a week off in distributing food to all of our students in need and all of our virtual families. We made modifications for those buildings that have been in person. We had to make modifications to how we were serving, how we were seating kids in the cafeterias. We've done that all extremely well, very safe. But I'm proud to say that those kids and those students that weren't able to be in person, since March, we've served over 425,000 meals that families and students have been able to come pick up at multiple locations. We tried multiple times. We do everything we can to make sure that that food is accessible. And I feel really good that we've been meeting that need.
Thank you, David. Allison Woods.
Good evening. So I'm going to talk with you guys about a number of different things, starting with social emotional, and looking at this really through a student lens. When we closed our doors on March 13th of last year, everybody walked out not realizing that they weren't coming back. And so when we started the school year, we really had to look at some closure activities, the end of the year celebrations, the goodbye to teachers, the goodbye to classmates. Students weren't able to get that, and we had to acknowledge that that is necessary so we could have a fresh start this year. we're really proud that K-12, we have a social emotional curriculum, not K-12, K-8 for all students, which is our second step curriculum. We did run into challenges with our virtual learning. Second step is meant for in-person instruction. So some of the videos and the extension activities essentially didn't work for the virtual environment. So that was something that we had to adapt and adjust to make sure that we were also providing our students that were in our virtual learning academy access to that daily social emotional curriculum and support. Another thing that we've seen with this pandemic and with students being not in the building on a regular basis, whether that be because we are closed, because they're virtual, because of hybrid model, is that they don't have access to the counselors and our Gallahue mental health therapists in the same way they would if they were in person. Our counselors who can stop by and check in on students, who can pull small groups. That we still have outreach. We're still trying to be proactive with our students that are not in person, but that's hard when they're not sitting in the classroom down the hall that you can just go grab them out of and check on them. Another thing that we've seen because of the pandemic really statewide is the need for mental health support for both students and staff and their families really has risen, and the availability to get that in a timely manner is not always available. We have folks that really need that and then have to wait weeks to be able to get appointments places just because the need for that is so great. One thing, a really shining star that came out of this, in the spring, we started a community outreach hotline. Once we closed and we know that we needed a place for people to call if they had questions and support, we created a phone number that we put out there, not knowing what we were doing, essentially. And we had sometimes 10 people working that line from open to close, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's all they did all day was receive phone calls and return phone calls for people who needed support. And some of that was, how do I get on Zoom? How do I access the lessons? But we also had a lot of, I need food, or we're quarantined and I can't get to the grocery store, and I need clothes, or we don't have housing. And so from that, we had a plan as a district to open a community resource center, but the pandemic really jump-started the need for that. And so James Taylor and his team launched and opened the Moorhead Community Resource Center in the fall of this school year. And if you haven't been over there, I really encourage you to reach out to Mr. Taylor and set up a visit. I know Senator Kreider, you've been over there, but they have done some incredible community outreach with food drives and holiday drives and coats. I think they gave out 200 coats one day last week. Just accessing assessing the needs of our community and working to reach them. And so please, if you haven't had a chance to go over there, they're just getting started and we're really excited to see where that goes. For our exceptional learners, we've had a lot of challenges figuring out how to do special education in virtual. How do we evaluate students when we can't bring them in or they're not able to come in? What do services look like, and how do we document that? Make sure that we're meeting all of those individual education plans. We have really fantastic teachers that have worked hard and worked in learning lots of new tricks and technology and breakout rooms and Zoom to meet student needs. We've also been really fortunate that our special programs, so our students with our more significant disabilities, have been coming in the building, even during times when we've been closed. So when we were closed for the November through the mid-January for our K-4, we were still bringing our students with more significant disabilities in a couple days a week in small groups, just because they can't fully access their education just virtually. Figuring out how to do related services. What is occupational therapy when you're teaching kids how to write and how to dress? look like when they're at home. You know, the equipment and the supplies and materials that students need to be able to do those activities at home. We've had to put work boxes and activity boxes together so students could participate in their therapies or come in and get those therapies. For our English language learners, we had a big learning curve with this. You know, you may or may not know, we have a lot of students right now that are not in this country that are participating in our virtual learning academy. So figuring out, okay, how do we have Zoom that will allow kids from out of the country to join because they went to visit family and weren't able to get back, or because that's just the safest place for them right now. You know, one of the things about our English language learners is having peer models, having teachers and curriculum that's accessible to them at school. And when they're at home, they don't have those peer models to the same extent. And they have parents supporting their learning to a great degree that often are learning the language themselves. And so, you know, really trying to find unique ways to make sure our English language learners are connected with our English language learners teachers and our support staff. We also are sending a lot of communication to families, not just through the schools, but through the state and through the health department. And not a lot of that is, you know, we work really hard to translate our materials, but there's a lot of things that are not translated into other languages for everyone in the community to be able to access and to understand. For our high ability students, you know, our assessments from last spring, we didn't have the ability to completely do those. So looking at identification for this year was challenging. And also for next year, looking at, you know, having our virtual learners come in to assess for identification, and then also being able to access all the high ability content. What is available in a virtual world as opposed to an in-person world when we're trying to do both has its challenges. So we've had to think outside the box. You know, we have some 8th graders that are in some high school Spanish classes online, and trying to give opportunities and make opportunities for students so they're not falling behind and can continue to excel in their academics. And then I want to shout out to Ms. Fessler and our preschool staff. We have worked really hard. Ms. Fessler and her staff have worked really hard to keep our preschool open for our age 3 to 5-year-old kiddos that are there. And that has been open since the beginning of the school year, and it has been open 5 days a week for childcare and preschool. But they are really scrambling to make it there as well. There are students to staff ratios that they have to meet for licensing, and when you have COVID and people that are quarantined and you still have to meet those ratios, that's important. There's cleaning complexities. So as Mr. Holt talked about at all the schools, when you go into a preschool classroom that has blocks and you know, toys and trucks, how to make sure that we're appropriately cleaning those every night. We've had to get have some unique situations there with lights and fog machines, and really thinking outside the box. And then also enrollment. Preschool enrollment has suffered because parents are choosing to keep their young kids who are not school age home during this time, which, you know, that creates an issue with enrollment and making sure that we can you know, keep our folks employed over there, and that they're bringing in income to be able to keep that building going. So they're working really hard. We still have openings over there. So if you know kids who need preschool and parents that need that, reach out to Mrs. Fessler and her crew.
Thank you, Allison. At this time, Pam Griffin is going to speak about our virtual program that we put in place. Due to the need for virtual, we designated one of our assistant superintendent main roles to oversee the virtual program. So Pam.
Thank you. And thank you again for this opportunity. Predicting the needs of our school community during a pandemic is a skill that we have continued to cultivate and model for our community during this time. The balancing act of trying to ensure that our students have learning opportunities, as well as trying to maintain continuity with course offerings and experiences, is a deeply, deeply personal mission for our district as well as our teachers. When we started this journey with our virtual learning, at the end of semester 1, we had 4,282 students in that program. When we started in the very, very beginning, we predicted that number would be somewhere from 700 to 1,000. And here we are in semester 2, we still have 3,238 students who are being served in that program. When a district the size of ours is working to make sure that we are trying to find a balance to meet the needs of our families, whether it be in person or whether it be in the learning environment, it is, like I said, a mission that we take very seriously. And so I've tried to frame this out in 4 areas for you. First of all, as a district, safeguarding all students, making sure that they have access to their education. And that's not just their content, it's access to their teachers, their service providers, the people that in their normal school experiences when they are attending every day, help them be successful. That is something that is very important to us. Kids need to interact with their teachers, and teachers need to interact with their students. But also within the learning environment, as Allison has already shared, the social emotional supports are just as important in finding that time to create those opportunities for students in the virtual environment is something that is a must-have. But also, when you don't have students coming to school, we need to make sure that our communication is on spot and consistent so that all of our families know where they can go to access food and services when they need it. Another thing that I wanted to highlight, and I know that our state leadership, some of you have influence on our education committee, is that we have rolled into state and federal accountability assessment season. iStep Plus, we've already started that. We started that last semester. iRead, iLearn, WIDA. The truth is that this is adding disruption to our learning. Our learning is already disrupted, and we've worked really hard to make sure that our students have as much contact time with their teachers as possible. But even in our in-person environment, when our students are seeing their teachers every other day, and our students in the Virtual Learning Academy are seeing their teachers virtually, that instructional time is golden. And as we think about state assessment within the context of what it takes away from a normal school year, when you have to schedule it in, I wanted to share with you that within the context of where we are today, within our in-person and our virtual learning, we already have a disruption to the continuity of the fact that some of our students only see their teacher every other day for direct instruction, for opportunities to interact, to get additional help, to have that connection to school. And now we are taking that time away from our teachers and our students, and we're filling it with state assessment. And something that you may be aware of or you may not be aware of, but in order to meet the timeline of completing these assessments, because of the size of our schools, the number of the students we serve in our in-person and virtual learning environment, not only will we be sacrificing time during the school day that could be spent on opportunities for learning to take assessments, but we will also be giving this test after school in order to meet the expectation for participation, and possibly Saturdays. The normal Monday through Friday school day is not going to be enough for us to complete this test successfully, while also respecting the needs of our families who have selected the learning environment for very deeply personal reasons. And so I did want to take a moment and highlight that. As Dr. Hansen has already said, if I could sing, I would literally sing the praises of our staff, our teachers, our custodians, our transportation people, our secretaries, our registrars. As Brian said earlier, when we opened up the Virtual Learning Academy option, we shifted 45 in-person teachers into the virtual learning world, and they teach grades K through 6. And then from Alice's side, from Office of Exceptional Learners, we added 26 teachers who are experts in exceptional learning, such as special education and providing supports to our English language learners. When you think about that, that is larger than some brick and mortar schools that are serving communities right now. And so On top of what we have going there, we also have the needs of our in-person students that are coming every other day hybrid so that we can socially distance safely within our schools to protect our students and staff, and how we're providing services to those families as well when their students are learning from home. And we're doing all of that while creating relationships with our students and maintaining them. And many of our legislators and representatives and senators know that this is a point of pride in Warren Township. The pride of the East Side is that relationship that we create with our students. And, that is something that some teachers are really working hard to not sacrifice, because it is a big portion of why we do the work that we do. One of the things that we're very proud of is the fact that our staff have stepped up in a really big way, and they've learned things that they've not had to do before, and they have really grown as educators so that they can meet the needs of our students. And so we will be providing 45 professional growth points to all of our Warren teachers to recognize their hard work and dedication to developing their skills within the craft of teaching. Some of our teachers have had to sacrifice their graduate programs. They've had to step away from their own education in order to be fully invested in our schools during this time. And so we want to make sure that anything that we can do to honor and highlight that work and to reward them for that is also recognized. Our students, they are really, like our teachers and our staff, the heroes in this situation as well. They have really had to learn how to approach their learning in a much different way. Our little Zoomers are engaging with not just their teachers, but they're interacting and collaborating with their peers. And we're really proud of the progress that they've made there. And then also in regards to the needs of our secondary students, the lift and making sure that we can offer all of the courses that our students deserve to have access to in their core content areas, AP, CTE, dual credit, performing arts is a significant lift. And it's one that we have worked, again, like I said, very hard to make sure that no student has to sacrifice a course that they need for a graduation pathway, or to help them earn that additional college credit so that they can offset some of the costs of their future education. And lastly, our parents and our caregivers not only have they've had the normal transition of learning like what it's like to be an elementary parent to a middle school parent to a high school parent. Well, now imagine making that transition as a virtual parent or a hybrid parent. And our parents have had to learn how to utilize technology in a way that allows them to connect them with their teachers and to support their students in a different way. And as we've shared a little bit, one of the things that we've had to work really, really closely with some of our families on is just making sure that they have access to email and accurate email, and also accurate student information. When you're living in a pandemic, what people sometimes fail to realize is that our families, as they're transitioning from one place to another to take care of their loved ones, the last thing they're thinking about is making sure we have an updated address or email address. And so, again, this is just a few of the areas that I wanted to highlight for you. Again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Dr. Hanson.
Thank you, ma'am. And kind of transitioning with that will be Kent Schroeder, our CTO, to talk a little bit about the challenges we faced with technology.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Good evening, everyone. Just give you a little history. Until last April, we were only a one-to-one student-to-device district at our high school, where students kept the device with them at school and at home. In grades kindergarten through 8, we had a classroom cart model where devices were often shared. And we had extras, right? We had a couple of extras in each classroom. However, when the pandemic began, we were forced to become a fully one-to-one district where students use their devices at home. And that has continued on to this year. We've expanded a true one-to-one in grades 5 through 12. And obviously our virtual students in elementary schools have their devices at home.
So obviously that means remote learning was new to not only our students, but as Mrs. Griffin was pointing out, the rest of our families as well. Part of the issue is many families, they just lack good, stable home internet access. Through some grant dollars, we were able to deploy right now over 2,000 LTE mobile hotspots through T-Mobile. That works most of the time. It's not always a good solution. There are gaps in coverage often that makes it difficult to get good access. You know, Zoom requires really good download and upload speeds. So that requires a lot more data bandwidth than the traditional homework access that students use. So, and a lower cost home internet, it can also be, so even if you have a direct connection through Comcast or AT&T, the lower ones, they still rate limit you quite a bit, especially on the upload speeds, which can make Zoom a little more difficult to use. Part of our challenge has just been parent support. It's stretched our already thin IT staff. Today we have 14,000 users, that's students and employees, 22,000 computers, and as I mentioned, 2,000 hotspots that we support with a staff of 7. So we have additional staff that support our student information system and manage data and state reporting, but those 7 staff members are responsible for all of the rest of that. So we've also expanded to provide parent support on site at the Community Resource Center. We also take phone calls from parents at our help desk, and we were able to extend our help desk ticketing system to offer parent remote access through our websites. They can get in and open a ticket without having to visit one of our locations. So to give you an idea, we've done about 730 online requests in the last 5 months, 1,000 or so in-person visits to the resource center since the beginning of school, over 500 calls for a help desk. You know, parents, as Mrs. Griffin was pointing out again, they were new to online learning as well. So they were learning how to use applications like our learning management system, our student information system, and many other learning applications that we have, including Zoom, right, for the first time. So they needed a lot of support with that. And sometimes it was this basic as how do I just log in so that my student can attend class. So those numbers mean roughly the Warren Technology Department alone has interacted with about 30% of our families so far this year. So nearly a third of our families have met with either directly or by the phone or online through our technology department. So that presents some challenges, especially diagnosing device issues or damage. We often end up just swapping out a new device because it's so critical for the students to have access from home. When we had the CART model, or even at the high school before, they were still coming to school every day. So if they had damage to their Chromebook, we could fix it and have it back to them within 24 hours. That doesn't quite work in our current setup. So, you know, we've in addition to the Community Resource Center help desk for families and the other options I've talked about, we also offer a help desk at our high school for 2 hours each morning. And we have an option in our middle schools, intermediate middle schools, for students to swap their non-working Chromebooks for a new one in the media center. So there, you know, that means that we're diagnosing that much later. We're just trying to run to keep up with the demand. And, you know, again, those device issues mean that we could have challenges with state testing, right? One is getting students on site for that, but then ensuring that the devices they're going to use to test work properly. And if they don't, then we also need to have loaner devices. And that means, especially our 3rd and 4th grade students, you know, they use an iPad all year. It's possible they may have to take their state testing on a Chromebook. That's not the end of the world. It's different than what they're accustomed to. So that's just another curveball. So that's a challenge that we're preparing for right now. We're getting many of our old Chromebooks back in operable condition so that we can use those as loaners for testing.
Thank you, Ken. And then lastly, Ryan Russell, one of our assistant superintendents, will kind of give an overview of our in-person instruction, as well as the challenges there.
Good evening, everyone. I echo my colleagues' appreciation for your time tonight. I know it's an incredibly busy time of year for you guys, and your time's appreciated. My colleagues have really articulated just the unique challenges, obviously, from a variety of different departments within those. And I don't want to be repetitive on some of those, but I do want to emphasize a few points. When I say teaching and learning has become a secondary need, I'm not saying that our focus is not on teaching and learning. However, we've had to elevate the basic hierarchy of needs for our students and community. As Allison specifically pointed out, social emotional wellness, basic needs. The amount of calls we get specifically for housing, food, and health service assistance is something that's not traditionally designed for a public school system, but one that we're happy to support our community with, and something additional that we take on. I really want to convey, just from a perspective of our building leaders, our principals, and our teachers, just the operational needs of what COVID has brought to us. So when we say things like PPE and hybrid schedules and transportation, health services, and all these things, each of them took a different layer of intensity when it came to planning what this school year would look like. We've referenced the infamous March 12th, 2020 date that seemed to what feels like more than a year ago at this point. But from that point on, obviously, we certainly didn't know when the go date would be when we came back to school. But with those things specifically, we've spent a significant amount of time coming up with new processes and procedures with really for everything operationally that we do. David mentioned the difficulty to find PPE. But from a building perspective, making sure students have PPE, making sure students know why they need PPE, making sure they're wearing PPE, hybrid schedules, obviously for us in Warren, that applies specifically to our students in grades 6 through 12. Which day do I go to school? Which day do I not go to school? And just the enormous amount of record keeping that entails. Transportation was no longer as simple as getting on a bus, right? Getting on a bus with a seating sheet and spacing ourselves apart. For the event that we did have a case or a close contact, that we would have to go back through records to be able to track that. All of these are man hours that take our buildings, right? Specifically to do that. Health services, as you're aware, we've had to create specific isolation rooms in each of our buildings. Those have to be staffed and they have to have appropriate equipment. Cleaning. Look, every single person in this district has taken on some aspect of cleaning. Whether you're a teacher cleaning off desk in between classes, whether you're a student who may participate in those classes, whether you're one of the custodial crews that's picking up the cleaning cloths, microfiber cloths that we utilize every night, is just an additional need. Classroom setups. If you've ever been in a classroom, you know teachers have a lot of stuff, right? And some of that stuff had to be removed in order to make room for social distancing with that. Cafeterias, not all of our students are eating in the cafeteria. We don't want to stuff as many students in a cafeteria for the spacing, so that means we're eating lunch in classrooms in many cases, and that requires more supervision. Hallways, we have an interstate system now with yellow tape directing students where to go. We also have the first pedestrian roundabout in Indianapolis at Warren Central High School now, as we affectionately refer to it as. And then COVID tracking, not only the data tracking, the contact tracing and everything else, just an enormous amount of time and effort there. Two main points I want to make just moving forward. Learning hubs. So even when we have been closed and moved to fully virtual for 100% of our students, I think it's important just to reiterate, we have never fully closed our doors to all students. Allison mentioned specifically the services and that we provided for exceptional learning students, special ed. However, we've identified students most at risk with social and emotional needs, with academic needs, and we've continued to transport them in the buildings to provide support to those students. We felt we could do that. We felt that it was critical, and we continue to do that regardless of what that approach looks like. One of the biggest pressure points and quite frankly pain points for us as we move forward has been student attendance and engagement. COVID has become a priority in every industry, right? It's changed every industry with that. And it's certainly caused us some significant engagement and attendance issues. So what I tried to qualify here is when we specifically refer to opportunity loss and the support that we need when we talk about the opportunities that our students have missed, what does that mean? Significantly for us, it's the decrease in credit obtainment of our high school students. As we know, our students require a certain amount of credits to graduate. This has provided a significant challenge for us to make sure that even after one semester in this 2021 school year, we've seen increased rates in students not obtain credits, which is going to have a long-lasting impact. We're prepared and ready to respond to that, but that rise is significant. Decrease in attendance, as we've talked about. Students are taking care of needs, and that need is not always learning for that day. We have a significant amount of students working to help provide for their family, which doesn't coincide with attending school every day at typical times. Increased need for remedial classes. This is K-12. This is students who have had this opportunity loss are going to need extended time and extended school in some capacity. And we're looking forward of ways where we can accomplish that over the next several years. Limited access to all school resources. So whether you're fully virtual or you're not coming to school every day, there's some things that can't be accomplished over a computer screen. Classrooms are stocked with resources, supply, curricular tools, and stuff that don't just get sent home. We try to send as much home as we can, but an in-person school environment has a lot of resources for students that are just housed in the classroom. And you have limited access to adults as well. And obviously, the single most important resource in our district is an adult-student relationship, and that's been limited and causes that opportunity loss as well. And then reduced peer interactions. Students need opportunities to interact with their peers in person. Yes, there are some fundamental things we can do virtually with students, but we certainly know and we see as a society the benefit of, for us, we see everything as a teaching opportunity. We teach peer interaction, right? That's a learned skill that without practice suffers. And I think we all certainly can qualify the consequences of a lack thereof. So I'll leave it at that. Dr. Hanson, back to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Cabinet and legislators. If it's okay, we're going to proceed through the presentation slide deck. There will be some opportunity at the end for you to share comments or questions if you have anything specific about this. We know that took a little bit longer than we have time for necessarily, but we really wanted to highlight kind of the challenges that we've been facing and the enormous lift and success that really we've had with the work of our teachers and our administrators and our families through this process. At this time, I'm going to ask David Holt to share a little bit about some legislative support and concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. As we always come to you with just, what we're watching, what we're following, House Bill 1001 is always number one on our list. We ask you to always make sure that you are looking at the K-12 appropriation and appropriately looking at the tuition support and make sure that's being adequately funded on an annual basis in a time when we are dedicating lots of time and effort and strategies to continue to improve the teacher compensation issues in the state of Indiana. It is a time that all available resources need to be pushed to the K-12 funding appropriation and line item. we need to continue to make sure we have conversations and good conversations about complexity funding. And then that third bullet point is really something that is something I've been talking a lot about here recently, in that, with COVID and just other issues nationally, the conversation between the difference between equity and equality. Our current K-12 funding model is an equality model, and it's moving more and more towards that and moving away from equity. And that complexity funding is important for us to make sure that we move back towards more of an equity, to make sure that we are addressing all students. I've told you for years, if you create a level playing field for Warren, we will win. But we don't always have a level playing field. So please, on 1001, make sure that is being addressed appropriately for K-12 funding. I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank all of you for your support on House Bill 1002 and Senate Bill 1. We talked in the fall to a lot of your staffers, specifically about our concerns about civil immunity and potential liability that could arise through COVID. And you have addressed that. You've presented bills that are moving forward that help us protect potential risk of liability. And I thank you for that. Any questions you would have about our concerns, I would be happy to address with you. But most importantly, I want to thank you for 1003 and Senate Bill 2 that helped improve the Indiana code that allowed second semester funding to be 100% funded for those students that are receiving virtual instruction. Mrs. Griffin told you that second semester we have 3,238 students still enrolled 100% virtually. At 85%, that would have been a loss of $427.73 per student this semester. So that would have resulted in a loss of almost $1.4 million to MSD Warren. And I know that those bills have moved and been passed, and I appreciate your support on that. Our concerns were heard in both chambers and all caucuses, and I really appreciate your support on that. Dr. Hanson, the next, some challenges, some concerns that we want to bring to your attention. 1005, 412, and 413 expand school choice. Those are concerning at a time when we need to be addressing all available resources and appropriations to public schools. These bills increase the income eligibility for school choice vouchers. They create a new funding program for students not enrolled in public schools to receive state tuition support to pay for their education dollars. I have concerns. 1005 specifically. Originally, LSA had the cost estimate at $202 million over the biennium. This past week, that was revised down to $66 million over the biennium. I'm just concerned at where that reduction came. They cited that they overestimated the number of students that would be eligible, but I'm still concerned at the potential cost to 1005 with the expansion of the income eligibility. 412, the estimate over the biennium is $112 million, $60 million the first year, $52 million the second year. And then 413, I do know that sections 1 through 4 on that bill were stripped. Sections 1 through 4 addressed the ability for a county fiscal body to take a portion of our operations fund levy and distribute it to charter schools. I will tell you that most urban schools have circuit breaker caps, and we already do not receive 100% of our levy. The original language in that bill was very troublesome, that they would take a portion of our certified levy, which we don't get all of it, and distribute it to charter schools. That has been stripped and is going to a study committee. But the rest of 413 talks about the education credits, and at a time when we really need to be focused on appropriating all dollars that are available to K-12, we are diverting some of those and taking some of that money away from dollars that we think are important for addressing, especially as we've identified this last year with COVID. If there is a need to address some of those, that funding needs to come from a separate source and not from sources that would be taken away from the K-12 appropriation. I thank you for always listening. I thank you for always being and challenging us and pushing us. We just ask for your support to push as many dollars as you can to K-12 education this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Oh, one. I do want to also thank you for House Bill 1186 was addressing early graduation. And I will tell you, we on an annual basis have many early grads, and that bill is being put into 1001. And I know that there is tremendous support for that. Last year we had 61 December grads. This year we had 32. The ability to keep those in our funding for the whole year is extremely important. So I wanted to also thank you for pushing that through and adding it to 1001 and that being that a part of the school funding formula.
Thanks, Dave. These legislative considerations really have already been mentioned this evening, so I won't go over those again. But we would appreciate your continued support in these areas as we try to navigate this pandemic. At this time, and I know we're coming towards the end, I'm going to ask Brian Simpkins if there are any questions from our community. Brian, do you have any of those right now?
Yes. For those attending,
go back to that previous screen.
Oh,
that last screen. Thank you. And now you can go ahead and talk, Brian. I'm just taking note.
Okay, no problem. Yes, for those attending, if you have a question for our forum, feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll try our best to get to as many as we can. Please be as succinct as possible. That's all I ask. And I do have one to get things started. It's from Jenny Whitaker, our president of our Warren Education Association. She says, Warren Education Association encourages you to oppose House Bill 1005, Senate Bill 412, and Senate Bill 413. Indiana already has the nation's largest voucher program. Expanding it now would consume nearly all of K-12 public education's new money for public education and Governor Holcomb's proposed budget. Over 90% of Indiana families choose public education, a notion all of you promote. If any of you are in favor of these bills, would you please explain to Warren's families why you prefer to expand a voucher program that serves less than 10% of all Indiana's student population instead of keeping a promise made to public education last year and investing in Warren students?
Well, I would not be in support of expanding the voucher program. I'm glad that we're finally taking an accountability so we can see precisely how much money is being diverted to vouchers, and that was a long time in coming. I think I saw something about 173 million or something. So that's a lot of money taken away from general public education. So I would not be in support of that.
I echo Senator Bro's statements. I vehemently oppose House Bill 1005 and hope to see it defeated.
This is Aaron Freeman, and I'll just say I was looking at the bills as you all were talking. Obviously, I don't serve in the House, and I'll let Mitch talk about the status of that bill. It looks like it passed out of their education committee, but it's in Ways and Means. So it's got a hurdle to get through there. But the other two on the Senate side haven't even been heard. So, you know, I would tell you just to take a wait and see approach. I mean, it's getting late in the hour here I mean, there's about 10 days left in this part of the session. So if it hasn't moved, I mean, I'm not telling you it won't, but I mean, they haven't moved yet. So.
May I just,
yeah,
may I just go ahead? I don't have a question. I just want to, I'm just stunned by the report that you have given us in terms of just all of the challenges you all have had to navigate as part of this COVID. My I guess I do have a question. Have you gotten any kind of guidance aside from CDC as the state giving you any assistance on how to manage any of these very complex issues that you're going through, or are you just doing this on your own as a school district without any state assistance?
Senator Bro, I'll provide one response to that. Dr. Kane with the Marion County Health Department has been phenomenal. We have a weekly call with her and the other Marion County superintendents every Friday to review new information from the Indiana State Department of Health, new information from the CDC. So that's been very helpful. We participate in the Wednesday governor press conferences or webinars. We have one of our lead nurses who's in connection with ISDH. So we're certainly not doing this by ourselves. We do have guidance from those health departments. That being said, as you know, it's been an ever-changing environment. When the cases go up, things change. When the cases go down, things change. And it just takes time to respond to that.
Well, I did have a question about, and I have question marks. I believe it was Ms. Griffin who talked about the need for, in order to meet the state assessments, needing to give the test after school or on Saturdays. What is that? Why is that? Why is there a need for that? And how do you propose getting that done? Is in order to meet the state assessments, these things are, yeah, I'm confused.
Sure. So for example, we'll just take 6th through 8th grade iLearn. Some of our students will be taking math, science, and social studies, or math, science, and or in language arts, right? And each of those components have 3 to 4 sections, and they are multiple hours of testing. And so if I am a 6th grader who attends every other day, because I'm hybrid on the other days, that means if it takes me in a normal school year 4 to 5 days to complete iStep, I want you now to think about a 2-week session when a hybrid student only gets to see their teacher 5 times in 10 days. That means 2 weeks of direct instruction time that they could be spending with their teachers, learning, reading Spanish, participating in PE. That will go away because we have to give that assessment. And I know 3,200 is a large number, but we are still servicing in all of our schools thousands of students. That's why we're on the hybrid schedule. And so on top of testing our hybrid students that attend every other day, we then have to bring in our virtual students. Some we're going to be able to support during the school day. Their parents will feel comfortable enough with all of the precautions that we've put in place to ensure that their students can test safely. But some of our families will opt for an after school time. And because we want to make sure that our students have access to their state testing, we're going to make sure that they have safe times after school, or in some cases on Saturday, to make sure that they can do that. And so this isn't like our 1,200 kids are reporting to middle school every day and we're able to create a 6th grade schedule and a 7th grade schedule and an 8th grade schedule and give that test all at the same time. We can't, because we don't see our kids every day. And because of social distancing, we've had to spread them out all over the building. And on top of that, we've got to create additional groups to meet additional learning needs because of language or special needs. It's already a Rubik's Cube when you're trying to plan it for normal school, but it is, yeah, it's just a lot. But
one last question, and then I'll let my colleagues ask questions and I will get out of here. Is there any kind of provision to have the test scores not be applicable during this period? Is there any way that we can either reduce the stress by making sure that the folks know that this is not going to be a test that's held against them, or is there some way that we can even postpone these tests during this during this period? Is that something we would have to do in the legislature?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Is there any provision now available to you that would either allow you to mitigate the scores or not even give the test? Is there any provision in place now for that?
To mitigate the score, yes, but not to give the test because it's attached to state or to federal funding.
Okay, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow, well, you guys have done an outstanding job. It's been very impressive. I feel for you and that you've had to do that, but I'm also very grateful that you've taken this so seriously and that you've made all these accommodations and that you've adapted, and thank you for this update.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, and safe travels.
Thank you.
Brian, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and lead into other comments from our legislators or questions. Lakeisha, if you would like to ask any questions or comments.
Apologize, I was on mute. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to invite me once again. I think this is maybe my 5th year doing this legislative session with you all. It's an awesome opportunity. My hat's off to you all. You all have gone from educators to food providers to comforters to filling in the gaps to co-parenting to protectors to you name it. You've been there. First responders, as far as I'm concerned, as far as these youth and kids, students are concerned, you've been their first responders in that aspect, not taken away from our first responders, but in their crisis. So thank you so much. Listening to your need, your priorities, I just want to say from a council level, what I could do is probably encourage, we could write a letter, encourage, have our city county council and our leadership encourage the state to either go against or for some of the things that you all need. And then specifically, I think you guys need to be able to be first on the list for the shot, for the vaccination. I was talking to some other workers, and this is conversations continuing to come up. Maybe I have some thoughts on some things. I won't air it tonight, and I'll circle back to Dr. Hanson on my thought on that and what I could put forth on maybe helping. We could work together on how to get you on the list to maybe prioritization for teachers being next for shots. Because, you know, like Dr. Hanson just said, numbers change, outcomes change, the story change, things change, they do things differently. I'm not a doctor, I'm not in medicine, but I do know everybody I talk to, you know, they put it on the seniors, but the seniors are sick and they're dying because their immune system is weak. Well, everybody I talk to, when I say, hey, are you around kids? And you've been watching yourself, and they was like, yeah, I've been around kids and then I got COVID. You know, we know that kids are not as, I'm not putting it on kids, but we know that youth and children are not gonna do the preventative measures we would do as adults, so that we have to protect the youth and we have to protect our teachers and faculty and staff as well. So whatever I can do, I'm here. Put your thoughts and comments to Dr. Hanson. Dr. Hanson, reach out to me and we'll do some follow-up conversation. I have a couple of things in mind I'd like to talk to you about. Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you, state legislators, for the work that you do. It was good seeing you all tonight. Mr. Freeman, good seeing you. Mitch, Dr. Bro, I think, Senator Bro, I think she's off, but good seeing you all tonight. Thank you all for all that you do.
I was going to say, Lakeisha, real quick, you don't call, you don't write. I got to see you once a year. I mean, come on.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Senator Freeman, would you mind providing any questions or comments?
Well, hey, I appreciate the evening, and it's good to see Lakeisha. Here's what I'd tell you. God bless you all for, you know, I think everybody's living through a time I didn't know I would be living through. I mean, I just saw my dad and my mom for the first time in person since last March, this past weekend. I mean, we've taken this seriously, and they have, I mean, everybody I think is doing it. And, again, bless y'all for, what you do and all the things you've been asked to do that you probably didn't know you'd ever be asked to do. So thanks for sticking in there. And I'll tell you, I mean, Miss Burke's comments at the beginning, look, I was taking notes and I get it, but, I hope we can all agree that, I mean, I don't hear anybody, saying anything other than what's true, which is, God bless teachers and God bless you educators. And, the only reason that I'm sitting here as some person in an elected office is because I got an education, a public education, by the way, in a small town in Indiana, and teachers took some, time with me, and thank God I got an education. I mean, I value it. And I will tell you, I think all of us, a legislature that's, predominantly, Republican at the moment. I mean, we value education very much. I don't have to tell you, $763 million more dollars went to education over the last 2 years. I mean, we spent $150 million to pay down pensions. I mean, we've tried to do everything we can to make sure you all have money. I had them pull numbers. I mean, thank God, from my numbers, I mean, Warren's got over $15 million in CARES Act money, in addition to the $86 million that comes to you normally. So, and there's more money coming, and we'll make sure it gets there. But look, we all got to work together. We all got to figure this out. The governor didn't call me and ask me about vaccines. I mean, that's a decision that, I hope y'all can appreciate is not some legislative decision. And it's hard. And don't take what I'm saying as defending the governor. He's got a difficult job, and whatever he does, somebody's going to be upset and somebody's going to be frustrated. But I think the governor, and I've not talked to him about this, but I think when he looks at it, the data shows the death rate from COVID is 65 and above. And the older you are, the more susceptible you are to this. And he has taken the priority of getting, he started at 80 and above and has worked their way down. And I think we're at 65 and over now. So look, we're going to hit teachers, and we're going to get to teachers. I mean, the governor made the decision to do it by who's most susceptible to this in terms of having a very bad outcome. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I'm telling you that I hope you can appreciate that he's doing the best he can with the information we have. And, all of us are supporting you and want to help you. And please don't think there's some, war on teachers or the messaging. I hope you're out there telling people that we're all in this together and we all got to get through it. So that's my message. Thanks for the night. And, you know how to get a hold of me if you need me through the year.
We appreciate your support, Senator Freeman. Representative Gore, questions or comments?
I'll echo some of the sentiments from Councilor Jackson and Senator Freeman. I was already in awe of what our public school teachers and staff did before COVID. And now I'm even more resolute in my belief that it's time to reverse the trend of dollars flowing out of public schools. It's time to listen to the governor's latest report that shows a real need for an increase in teacher pay to be able to attract and retain teachers. We have to pay them like the professionals that they are. We know that when adjusted for inflation, public education funding has barely kept up with where it was a decade ago. I learn more and more. I'm the new kid on the block. Freshman legislator. So I don't have any specific questions now. This was incredibly enlightening for me. And I'm sure I'll have just gobs of questions over the next probably several years. I hope I'll always be learning more and more about this. So I know I can reach out to you, Dr. Hanson, and your team. I really just want to say thank you to our teachers and your staff there in Warren Township. I'm a proud product of public schools. I graduated from Franklin Central, but my siblings graduated from Warren, and my wife Brittany and I live here in Warren. And if we're blessed with kids here in the near future, we look forward to sending them to be with you guys. So I also want to just quickly, I know Rod Elsesser, Mr. Elsesser is watching in right now. I want to give him a shout, himself a former educator. So thank you guys. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you, Representative Gore. Senator Kreider.
Yeah, and thanks. It's always good to be with you, and hopefully I'll be able to see you Friday with the breakfast with the superintendents. I don't know if you'll be able to make it. I've been engaged with superintendents from my district since this began, and I've been incredibly impressed with the work that you folks have done. I got kind of a small taste of the challenges you face as co-chair of the Legislative Continuity Committee as we tried to develop the protocols and rules for how legislature was going to conduct itself this session. And so I realized that every time you think you have a solution, something else seems to unravel, and you folks have stepped up in a huge way. And so I was talking to a group of teachers earlier this evening and just thank them for what seems to be an incredible effort. I've watched my grandchildren interact with their teachers as they take their classes online, and it's just you can hear the frustration at times and see it, and so I really appreciate the work that's been done. And so I think hopefully we're starting to turn a corner on this thing, but if anything, this has demonstrated how really incredible the education system, the public education system in Indiana is. And so I hope that we'll be able to do good things in the budget. I'm probably one of the few legislators on the line tonight that sits on an appropriations committee, and so we're already starting our conversations, and I'm really hoping that we can come up with the dollars to do good things for public education this session. It's great to be with you as always, and I wish everybody good health and hope you stay well.
Thank you, Senator Kreider. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Rachel Burke for board comments.
So again, I want to thank everyone for your time tonight, and I'm going to start with Howard Dorsey.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the legislators for taking out of their busy schedule to come and talk to us and hear what we've got to present to them to show that how tough it really is in during these times of COVID and all. And I also want to say I really appreciate you providing your support for the voucher situation. We really would like to get you to hang in there with us on that, because that's going to be that's a problem right now. And also a little relief on the assessments that are being thrown at us. These are tough times to try and get assessments done, and so I'm really pleased to hear your support in that area as well. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Howard. Julie French.
Hello. I'm not going to repeat what all of our administrators have told you, because I know we're running behind. But I do want to reiterate what our administrators have said about our teachers. They have done an amazing job. I know that. I live with a teacher. My husband teaches out at Franklin Central, where it sounds like a couple of you have ties. But I would be very remiss if I did not thank a group of people that has been throwing out thank yous to everybody else. But our administrators have done an amazing job working through these times and trying to figure out all the rights and wrongs, and including, they don't do it top down. They include our staff in there too, because our teachers know what goes on in the classroom. So they're asking our WEA and teachers what's going on and stuff. So I just want to make sure we say thank you to our administrators as well. And thank you all for joining us this evening as well.
Thank you so much, Julie. Lashana Triplett.
Hello, everyone. I apologize if I fade out. I'm having some technical difficulties, but I first want to thank the legislators for being on, and State Representative Ms. Jackson, and taking the time out to hear the concerns, not only in the Warren community, but in our community. And to the administrators at Warren, from a community lens, I appreciate you touching the topics and the elephants in the room that no one wants to tackle, because these are real concerns in our community. So as we fight to get more funding into our schools to be able to serve our students as well as our teachers and our families, I just appreciate the extra efforts that Warren has taken to make sure that that happens, which doing racial equality surveys, just the extra steps that you guys have taken. And I just would, again, as my other board members have said, to the legislators, whatever you can do to help us make sure that funding stays in our schools and that our teachers are taken care of and prioritize as educators on that list, we would greatly appreciate it. And whatever we need to do, please let us know, because we're there. Great job, Warren administrators.
Thank you so much, Lashana. Gloria Williams.
Well, I would like to say thank you to everyone that took time out of their busy schedule to come tonight. And thank you to all of our guests and legislators that came out to listen to our concerns. I would just like to say, like David Holt said, thank you for all of your support that you have always given us, and some of the things that you've accomplished on supporting us as public schools. And we just appreciate you taking time to listen to our concerns and all the things that you've helped us do up until this point. I would appreciate if you would continue to take a look at public education and the vouchers that we were talking about. You know, many of you have said that you graduated from a public school, and we want to make sure that the public school systems are getting what they need and not losing out to charter schools. So it's very, very important that you focus on these bills for us so that the public school system can continue to get the support that they need. And so we appreciate, we have faith in you that you will continue to help us. And moving forward, we just look forward to more accomplishments in that area in support of our public education. And as far as our teachers are concerned, whatever you can do to support our teachers, you know, we're looking into the future. And, you know, like I think Freeman was the one that said, you know, he thanked the teachers for giving him such a good education. And if we don't support our teachers, and we don't encourage people to go into the teaching profession because they're looking at teachers not getting what they need, then what is that going to say for our future? You know, we won't have the support we need to educate our students. And so therefore it's so important that we give the teachers the support that they need, more compensation that they need, money that they need, so that they continue to provide the education to our future leaders, which are our students today. So we just thank you for being here. And, you know, like someone said, working together works. So we just thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Michelle Wright.
I would just like to say thank you very much for coming out and all of your support. We really appreciate it. And again, piggyback off of everybody else, it's very, very important that the teachers get the vaccine and that they and they feel safe. so that they come to work and they're productive for these children, because they are our future. And without the teachers, we don't have a future. The kids don't have a future. So thank you very much for all your support again, and stay safe. Have a blessed evening. Oh, shoot. Oh, no. What happened?
Okay. And so I will end, and I am going to do a quick little round robin of some different bills that are out there. There's been a lot of discussion about teacher pay, which is good and something we need to hear and something we need to discuss. I would really appreciate if those on the call would really take a look at House Bill 1594, specifically the amendments that were put in today. And it's not that I'm speaking against the amendments, but much of the language that went into the bill today specifically referenced the study that came out on teacher pay. But what's interesting is it didn't fix the language that went in today. In no way touched on the recommendations made to state government about teacher pay. It put into 1594, what was put in were the references made to school governments about teacher pay, policies we could set ourselves, and in virtually all cases, policies that we already do. And so I find it very interesting and kind of sad that when state legislators had the ability to put into that bill language referencing the recommendations made by that report as to things the state could do, instead they put in, what was the language that was put in was all of the language as to what local leaders could do. And again, those are all things that we are currently doing and or in no way would affect us. I want to reiterate something that Representative Gore said earlier. Once you take into consideration complexity, we are making less than inflation. And we have for the past, checks by file, since at least 2015. During that time, healthcare prices have increased drastically, and we are making net less than inflation. That's got to stop. We can't keep living on less and less money and doing all of the work that we have to do. I sat in, and I know that everyone who's a panelist knows about and respects Larry DeBoer. I don't think there's anyone in the state of Indiana that doesn't respect his work. The comment that he made today on the local government webinar was that virtual education is no less and is perhaps more expensive, if not significantly more expensive than standard what you do in the classroom, 365-day education. And that's something that needs to be remembered. To cover a couple other bills very quickly, House Bill 1397 is a CTE bill in which much of the language is really, really good, but there is a section of the bill that strips back money from less than moderate value programs. These are programs that keep our young people, and very specifically young women, interested in school and keep them in school. They include things like cosmetology, fashion and textile arts, culinary arts, and interestingly enough, horticultural arts, which for a farming state seems to be a really odd thing to decide to quit funding. These may not be the most high-paying careers out there, but they are worthwhile and worthy careers, and they are careers that people need to hold. They are careers that our young ladies are very, very interested in. And so I really worry about that part of the bill and the funding that it strips from those programs and can potentially affect our young ladies. They need to have a reason to come to school as well. We always hear talk about sports and media and orchestra, and all of those are wonderful and I love them all, but cosmetology for a lot of people, fashion design for a lot of people, that's their reason for going to school. That's the class that they love. That's the thing that affects their heart. And just because it is not the most high-paying job out there does not mean that it is not worthy of training, and that these young ladies are not worthy of having their time and efforts, and that we should not teach that. Not that we would stop teaching it, because of course we wouldn't, but that funding shouldn't be going anywhere.
That's that bill number, Rachel. I'm sorry.
It is House Bill 1397. And it's all pretty decent until you get to that stripping of the, and it's not even a lot of money. It's $200 per student per program in most cases, but it still is money. And stripping any money, particularly in programs that have a worthwhile purpose, I just am opposed to. Another little bill, Senate Bill 288 removes legal protections for school libraries. And that's actually removes criminal legal protection for school libraries, which is going to set us up with 90 different DAs determining what is and is not appropriate to have in school libraries over 90 different counties. I think you are opening a just opening a problem that doesn't need to be opened, and to trust that school libraries have in them what is appropriate for school children. You know, last year there was a lot made about House Bill 1003 passing, how you had the ability to get rid of some regulations and things like that, and yet you put that next to House Bill 1594, which puts a whole bunch of regulations right back in, and again, things that were already recommended that we are doing, and it doesn't seem like there's any gain being made. And so I think there needs to have, you know, these unfunded mandates that are constantly going on. I did the math on Senate Bill 54. So if you assume 900 freshmen, which I understand is a lot, I mean, 900 seniors, but we have a lot of people in our high school, and you assume that it takes a counselor or a principal a mere 10 minutes to go through each and every student, that's 4 work weeks of work being put in for one part of one Senate bill for the FAFSA. That's 4 work weeks of work. That is not an insignificant period of time where we have to have someone do that work. And it has to be very specific people. I mean, more people were added. It's not just principal, it can be a counselor, but plus all of that is taking place during a point in time when we have kids doing FAFSAs. That's taking place during a point in time where scheduling is taking place. We're talking about the future and next year and graduation. All of those things take place at roughly the same time. It's not like it's taking place during a season of the year when we may, I don't think our counselors ever have spare time, but if we thought that they might, they would have it then. They don't. And so I think, and I would ask that those mandates, especially mandates that carry that big of a price tag in human hours, really be looked at. 1005 went from being terrible to less terrible, but in its current form, it does 2 things. Number one, it increases the amount of money that is paid for vouchers across all levels to 90% instead of capping it at 50% for certain incomes. And number 2, it raises the income level to, for a family of 5, over $170,000 to qualify. That is, in my mind, by any measure of the imagination, wealthy if you're making that much a year. And I am certain for those who live within Warren Township, that is definitely spending Indiana tax dollars to support parents and students who have the money to support themselves. You are taking money out of the pockets from our children and giving it into the pockets of those who are making $170,000 a year. There has to be balance. That money has to go towards public education. We appreciate any penny we get because we need all of the pennies we can get, but we would ask that there's an understanding that we educate everyone. And because of that, often, you know, the complexity index exists for a reason. Those that we educate can be very expensive to educate. The complexity index helps even the playing field for all students, not to the point where it really does, but it helps create a chunk in it. If you look at something like the educational savings accounts, and I know they've been renamed a couple of times, and it depends on whether you're looking at the House or the Senate language. If that money goes out and those students return to us after 3 months, we're still going to end up spending the money that we would have spent on them for that 9 months that they're in our care. Just because we're not getting paid for it doesn't mean we quit providing services. that is stealing from public schools. That is taking money that is spent for children, that we can spend on children, out of our pockets and making us spend the money anyway. You know, it's not a cost-saving measure. It is something that will hurt public schools and will make us move things from one line item to another to make sure that we are providing all students with all education. So that being said, because I had a list, we really do appreciate your time. I have been downtown and I have testified many times over many years, and sometimes you feel as if you're not being heard, and sometimes you feel as if you're being heard quite a bit. And what I know is that during this legislative breakfast, which I'm going to continue to call it, we know we're heard. We may not always agree with what we are each saying, but we know you're hearing us, and we know that you're taking our concerns very seriously. And we do truly, truly appreciate that as a district and as a board, this opportunity for us to have this dialogue with you and to get in front of you and really make sure that you are able to hear us and we are able to hear you. And so I do want to, again, thank you for your time, especially on this absolutely cold and snowy night, when I know that you would all probably rather be someplace else, probably someplace warmer, unless the room that you're in your house is nice and toasty. But I really, really do appreciate all of your times and all of your comments, and to be able to see things that we disagree on from your point of view and to know where we have agreement. We all want the same thing. We want the children of Warren Township to receive the absolute best education they can. We may disagree on how that happens or where that happens, but I know that we all want that. And we all want the teachers of Warren Township to make a livable wage and a fair wage, and we want them to be safe and secure. And so I want to thank you for wanting that along with us, because that is really what is important here, is our students and our teachers, and keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, keeping them fed, and keeping them educated. So I am capable of rambling forever. And so before I do that, I'm again going to say thank you for your time and your consideration. And we look forward to doing this again in a year. Please expect to hear from us, especially after that transition period that Senator Freeman mentioned earlier. Once bills flip houses, we know what's sticking to the fan and what's not. And so you'll be hearing from us then. And thank you just for always being willing to keep communication lines open. And I hope you have a lovely evening.